In this video, we're going to show you how to set up a SuperNode for Zencash or a SecureNode. There's only a couple differences at this moment in time. If you're watching this video later on in the year, there may be some differences, probably around November, December, but for now, they're very, very similar in the way that they're set up, and I'll point out the differences where it's appropriate. So you're going to need a virtual private server, and for a SecureNode, OVH, Virtual VPS SSD2 is probably the most cost-effective plan. And for a SuperNode, the most cost-effective plan at this moment in time is the Contabo VPS M, which is 12 gigabyte RAM with SSD storage. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. So here we have the instructions on how to install SecureNodes and SuperNodes. Here we have our Contabo virtual private server. And so let's just take a look at what we need to do to get started here. So the first thing is domain name registration. And this part is a little bit different if you have a SecureNode versus a SuperNode. For a SuperNode, you're going to need a higher level VPS, 8 gigabytes of RAM. You can read all that stuff on your own. When it comes to domain name registration, you're going to need an A record and a quadruple A record. So an A record points to an IP4 address, and the quadruple A record points to the IPv6 address. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So you're going to create an A record. So an example, supernode at zeniscool.com, and that goes to your IP4 address. And then your quadruple A record, same domain name, but it points to your IPv6 address. Now, I've got Google Dig. If you just type in Google Dig into Google, it'll pop this up. You can put in your A record, put in your domain name. It'll show you if it's correctly mapped. And then here, click the quadruple A, and it'll show you if you're correctly mapped. Now, one little trick that sometimes happens is you'll see that they collapse out all those zeros. And so that is exactly the same thing as that. So I've already got that configured. I've showed previous videos how to configure Namecheap that way. So I'm not going to go over that again. So in addition to checking to make sure that your domain names are correctly configured in Google Dig, you can also try and ping your domain name. So ping regular and ping 6. So notice that ping regular will give you the IP4 address and ping 6 will give you the IP6 address. And if you type hostname minus capital I, it should show you both of yours if your VPS is correctly configured. One of the nice things about using Contabo is that it's already pre-configured. If you use OVH, you're going to have to actually configure the IPv6 to be active, and that's outside the scope of this particular video. So let's go on to the next part, and we're going to actually begin to install the begin the install. So the first thing is we need to create a regular user. So in this case, we're going to use, I don't know why exactly, but they want to use variable in order to store the username, and then we're going to create a user using that variable. So you could just put in username, your username that you want, so Zenops in this case, instead of $username, but whatever. It's nice, I suppose. Now we're going to su username, and that's going to become that user. So now we have become Zenops. One thing that you'll notice is that you're still in the root directory. So what I've done is type cd and then enter, and then that will put you into the home directory of your new username. See, so that /root went away, and now I'm just a regular user. The next thing we need to do is configure our domain name variable. So fqdn is going to equal, and we're going to paste in or type in your domain name. So here's the domain name that I'm using for this particular node. And then that's going to store that variable in the environment shell. Now we're going to add that to our .bashrc. .bashrc is kind of like a batch file that runs at startup when you log into your username. So every time you log in, it's going to create that variable and make sure that that variable is in your environment. And there's a particular reason for that we don't need to get into, but it's useful to do that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to update our VPS with the sudo apt-get update and then sudo apt-get install, and we're going to install the software that is needed to run Zen. One of the things that I don't really like about this particular official guide is that you do things in little bits and bobs that take longer than if you just did it all at once. So what you'll see is that there's a couple different places throughout the guide where it has you apt-get install, and if you just apt-get installed everything all at once, it would actually be a little bit faster. So first we updated and we installed some of the essential software. Now we're going to add the Zen server. Now that first step of installing those initial things is absolutely necessary on some virtual private servers. When it comes to, notice that it failed. So there was backup information. So no valid PGP data found. When that happens, you've got an alternate version available. So we're going to use the alternate version. If you're using OVH or Contabo, you don't need to do that official first step. You can actually skip it and install everything all at once. Just add the Zen server repository and go ahead and add everything at once. But that's outside the scope of this particular guide, how to do that. So this next little step, you can't run it on Debian. If you're using Debian instead of Ubuntu, you've got to do that little link that says part 3b instead. All right, so at this point, we are installing certbot. So certbot is a service that connects to a service called Let's Encrypt, which provides SSL certificates, secure socket layer, also known as TLS certificates, which is required for running a SecureNode. And it actually does it for free, so you don't have to purchase one, which is kind of nice. The downside is you have to renew it every 3 months. So part of the install guide is going to be creating a service that checks to see if it's expired and then renews it automatically. At this point, we are getting the Zen parameters, and all of the Zencash forks have this step required, and it's going to take a little while. So while we do that, let me just go to the next part so we can see it. So we're going to run Zen, and then we are going to create a create a configuration file, and then from there we're going to run Zen and do some stuff to it. So at this point, I'm going to just pause the video until this is done because it's going to take a couple minutes. No reason to watch paint dry. Okay, so the parameters finished downloading. We run Zen. It says, I can't run without a configuration file. Paste that in, and it automatically created one for us. Now, the next step is bootstrap the blocks and chain state folders from an existing node. Now, you can't do that if you don't already have a node. So we're going to skip it for this particular install because I'm assuming that if you're watching it, you're a newbie and you don't have one to install it to bootstrap from. So we're just going to start running Zen, and you got to pretty much wait 24 hours or so for it to completely index and download the blockchain. You can't really do the benchmarking step, which is recommended, until the blockchain is fully synced. You're going to fail the benchmark and you're going to think that your VPS is crap when it's not the case. All right. So in this case, you get info shows that it's working. The next thing, so Zen CLI get info. And sometimes you might see an error code that says loading block index. In that case, it means that Zen is almost getting ready to run, but it's not running yet. So wait a few minutes, do it again, and you should see it. The next thing we need to do is add a swap file. So we're going to click on that part 3a, add a swap, and the recommended swap for a SuperNode is 8 gigabytes of RAM if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, the Contabo has 12 gigabytes, so you don't necessarily need all 8, but it's a good idea to go ahead and make all 8. So basically just copy and paste all of these commands, but where it says sudo allocate L2G, you're going to change that to 8G to create an 8G swap file. Now the Contabo VPS has a lot more memory than, or a lot more hard drive space than needed, so you could potentially make a much bigger one, 32 or even 64 gigabytes if you really wanted to. So just copy and paste these. Make sure you're watching for any errors. If you see errors, then you need to ask for help, but you shouldn't see errors. So just keep copying through. We're going to turn the swap file on, and then we're going to check to see our memory, see if it's increased. So we should now see the memory. Now we have a swap file. That's only 6 gigabytes. Off video, I'm going to go back and make it 8, just to be the same as the guide. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make some tweaks for performance, and then make those performance tweaks permanent. Now, the guide says right here, test your node. But I can tell you, if you test right now, it's not going to work because it's still benchmarking the, still downloading and indexing the blockchain. And that's going to take 24 hours, more or less, for it to happen. It's very CPU intensive. Your VPS will fail unless it's Mongo VPS. So I'm going to skip ahead, show you the difference. Okay, so here it is, 354 seconds. That's not good enough for a SecureNode, let alone a SuperNode. What you have to do is you have to wait for the blockchain to completely sync, then run it, and the time will go down dramatically. So don't do your benchmark until your blockchain is completely synced. Now, you can do some of the guide before it's completely synced. So you could create your SSL certificate, and you could create, just do that and stop, come back the next day, keep going. That's what I'd recommend. Or just stop here, come back tomorrow. So you might be thinking, how will I know when it's done syncing? And what you can do is ZenCLI get info and check the blocks against the official Zencash block explorer. When they're the same, you're ready to go. Sorry, there is actually one other thing you should do before you are done here, and that is secure your SSH, secure the server. So we're going to secure SSH and also enable a firewall. So I'll show you that, and then go ahead and wait 24 hours and come back, finish the installation. All right, so part 4 is securing SSH, and then part 5 is creating the firewall. And it looks like my screen capture software ate part 4. But basically just copy and paste the commands as they are, and it should work just fine. So in this case, you can see the ports that are open for the firewall enabled, and now it will load at boot. You've done the SSH that I didn't show you. You did the firewall. Now you're secure. Before you disconnect, open another window. Try and connect to the service again using your SSH key, and make sure that you can do that. I've got a couple videos that will be linked in the video description for this video on how to create SSH keys and log in with them. So make sure you can do that before you log out of this one. If you don't do that step, you could end up locked out of your own VPS, which is kind of embarrassing, and you have to start over from scratch if you don't know how to rescue it. So don't do it. Make sure it works before you exit your VPS. Don't turn the VPS off, because then it won't be syncing. You need to sync overnight. Come back tomorrow. We'll finish up. Welcome back, and we are now going to do part 6. It's been 24 hours. We're completely synced. You can check with ZenCLI get info, and we're just going to go ahead and check to make sure that our fully qualified domain name variable is still valid. It is. We're also going to make sure that bash.rc has that line in it, and it does. And so now we're going to, this is optional. Some VPSs install Apache by default, and if it does, then it's not going to work the next part. So if this next part fails, go back up and do that we skipped. So this is going to be issuing the certificate through Let's Encrypt using certbot. Sorry, there, wrong line. This is the line we need, certbot. So we're going to create the Let's Encrypt SSL with certbot, and you should see it spit out some things. You don't want to see errors. If you see errors, you have to fix them. Congratulations. See, perfect. So now let's go ahead and do the next step. We're going to copy those from the main directory where they were created into a certificate directory, and then we're going to update the certificate. So basically we're going to tell our system to trust that particular key that was created. All right, that's done. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tell zen.conf where to find those certificates. So you can copy those two lines. Those are going to add it to the zen.conf file. And now we're going to make sure that, see what it says, root sudo? Our user is part of the sudo group. So by changing the ownership to the sudo group, that will give our user permission to access those files as needed to be able to access the SSL for Zen. Now what we need to do is stop Zen, and then we need to wait about 30 seconds or so, restart it, wait 30 seconds or so, and see that it's TLS certified, verified, true. You're going to see a slightly different thing. I wasn't actually running Zen at that time, so you'll see Zen stopping. So you go ahead and run Zen. If you copy that line before, Zen should automatically work, but because I wasn't running it, it failed and I had to manually do it. Don't worry about it. You have to wait until the block index loads. There we go. So get info shows us that it's working, and now get network info. And scroll up a little bit. And what you're looking for is TLS cert verified true. If you get false, something went wrong and you need to troubleshoot and figure out what it was. Okay, next what we need to do is we need to make sure that you have your 42 or 500 Zen, depending whether you're running a SecureNode or SuperNode, in a transparent address. Horizon is kind of really meant for running these things. It has some nice little features that we're not going to mention in this particular video. But if you don't already have a SecureNode and you're not using the full swing wallet, which is kind of annoying to use if you ask me, you've got to do a workaround in order to get, you have to have Zen in a private address. So the way that you do that is you create a transparent address on your SecureNode, and then you send 0.05 Zen from your Horizon wallet to the new transparent address. And then from there, you're going to send that Zen to two new private shielded addresses on the server. So all you have to do is just copy and paste those lines in there, and it will automatically make everything happen. So here we created the transparent address. So you're going to copy that, put it into the Horizon wallet, send 0.05 to it. Then once that arrives, so you're going to use this little command, watch -n blah, 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 and it's going to watch and make sure it's going to send, eventually you'll see a transparent address balance. Once you see that transparent address balance, go ahead and copy this line, paste it into your VPS, and it will automatically send, it'll split that balance into two pieces and send it to two new shielded transactions to two different new shielded private addresses. Those are going to be used as fuel for your challenges, which your node has to pass in order to get paid. 0.05 Zen is not very much Zen, but it will last for a very long time now under the new model. The old model had like multiple challenges per day, then they went down to one per day. Now it's like one every 3 days. So you don't need a lot of Zen to work. Oh, remember I told you don't run that benchmark while it's syncing the blockchain. So our 350 went down to 83 once we fully synced the blockchain. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next part. So what we're doing right now is we're waiting for our shielded addresses to be fully funded. So in the meantime, we need to create the tracker. So we're going to do that first line, and then we're going to do the second line. The first line is installing some software that's required. The the next line that we just did right there is going to be cloning the tracker program. So we're pulling the tracker program from its repository on GitHub, and we're pulling it down onto our local VPS. Then we're going to change directories into that new directory that was just created called Node Tracker. And then we have to use npm install to install the program and make sure that it works correctly. If you skip that step, it won't work right. All right, so now that's done. If you see any funky errors there, you might want to ask in Zencash Discord. Now we're going to run the node setup program. And I'm going to blur out all this stuff here, but you need to enter whether you want secure or SuperNode. And then it's going to ask you for your staking address. This is going to be the address that has your either 500 or 42 Zen in it. And then you have to put in your email address that you want to receive alerts. And then you need to put in the fully qualified domain name, and you need to put in the region, whether it's going to be Europe or North America. Then, before you run the Node app program, you need to make sure that you have private Zen balance. So remember, we created the transparent address. We sent the Zen fuel to it for challenges. Then we sent that into 2 shielded addresses or private addresses. So now we have to wait for those private addresses to show up before you run the Node app part. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. It'll say there's an error. So if you run Node app by accident, hit Control-C to exit it and make sure you have a balance. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes and our private address, our private balance now shows up. So now what we need to do is type in nodeapp.js and it will manually run the tracker. Now, you shouldn't do this step if you don't want to see any downtime, because when we close it so we can then make it run automatically, we're going to get a little bit of downtime. So what you want to see is registration successful. What you can do at this point also is go to the SuperNode Zen System or SecureNode Zen System tracking website, and you can check and make sure it's up. I'm going to skip that right now because I know it will be up once we finish things up. Now what we have to do is what's called configure services. So these are little programs that automatically run Zen and automatically run the tracking program, the node tracker, when you restart the computer. So just copy and paste it. One thing that I'm going to do is the official guide puts it in /lib/systemd/system Zen service. You can see that at the bottom. I'm going to edit that and I'm going to change it to /etc/systemd system Zen service. /lib is where packages that come pre-configured by the operating system, by Ubuntu, that's where those go. User configured system files should go in /etc. So yeah, whatever. You don't have to change it if you want to, but I do. Okay, so what Zen service is going to do, by the way, is it's going to run Zen when Zen crashes or when you reboot the server. So it'll automatically restart it anytime that it is stopped. Next, we're going to do the exact same thing with the Zen tracker. So this little snippet is going to automatically run the Zen tracker if it crashes or if you reboot. And then we're going to stop Zen. We're going to let it sleep for 5 seconds and make sure it's really gone. And then we're going to rerun it. We're going to rerun it with our service. So go ahead and just copy and paste that. And it's also going to make sure that your user owns all of the files they should own. So now we're going to systemctl, that is the system control, and we're going to use it to start Zen and Zen tracker services, which are the 2 little files we just created. And now it should work. So let's go ahead and use systemctl status, and you see that both of them are active and running. Yay, it worked. You can also check by running zencli or zencli get info. You can also check their logs, the current status of the logs, by looking here. So here we can see that Zen is still verifying blocks. It's not quite running yet. And there it goes. So everything is good. Notice that it says cert valid at the bottom right there. And it's not going to say registered because we were already there before. We already ran it manually, so we've already been registered. If you'd never run it, this is the first time you're running it, you would see registered. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run the same command as before, but instead of start, it's going to be enable. Hit Control-C to stop that log that you were looking at, that live log you were just looking at. Okay, so it's enabled, and now we're going to create a few more services. This particular one is going to automatically check to see if your SSL certificate is expired, and then it's going to automatically renew it when it does. So that was the service that updates the certbot, and then this is a service that checks to see if it's expired. And when it's expired, it calls that other one that we just did. Then we're going to disable the certbot timer that comes pre-configured with certbot, because we want to do it a little bit differently. And we are going to then start the two services that we just created. All right, so that started. Then we're going to check its status. And we can see that it's enabled, vendor preset enabled, and currently is inactive dead. Okay, so notice that it says enabled, and then we have active, inactive, and that matches what is up at the top there. So we can go ahead and do the next part. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to start and enable the update timer. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do the system status, system CTL status on that, and notice that it's active and it's waiting because it's not yet time for it to do its thing. And then you can do, and it's enabled, so yeah. Next thing we can do is sudo system CTL list timers, and what we should see is that Zen update timer listed among those timers. So go ahead and paste that in there. And you can see, there we go. And you can see Zen update timer activates Zen update service, which is exactly what you'd like to see. And it shows you that there. All right, so next we're going to reboot, and it should automatically come back up and everything should work as expected. Now, before you reboot, it's a really good idea to check and make sure that it's not in the middle of a challenge. Typically, it'll receive its first challenge within the first 1 to 5 minutes of being up. So journal CTL minus FU, which sounds nasty, but in this case it's not, Zen Tracker will show us whether there is a challenge that's being or currently undergoing. And at the moment, you can see that there's not one. So, it actually just started. So I was about to reboot, and then it shows us that the challenge started. So in this case, we are not going to reboot until that challenge shows successful. So I'm going to pause the video, and there you go, challenge successful. And now we can go ahead and reboot. I'm going to pause the video again while it reboots. And here we are, we logged back in. And we're going to do that journal minus FU Zen Tracker one last time, and you can see that it's up. And the only last thing we have to do now is look in the Zen Tracker website. So here's our the SuperNode Zen Tracker website. Sorry, it's cut off a little bit. And we're going to see that it's up. And we're going to see that you can't see it, it's off to the left, but it says that the certificate is valid. We can click on challenges. We see that it's passed its first challenge in under 90 seconds. So we're all good. And we can see that it's running the Zen version. We can see the tracker that it's running. You can see its status as far as being up or down. There's currently only 2 peers because we just restarted it. And we're all good. So congratulations on your first SuperNode. If you run into trouble, you can contact me and I can try and help you, or you can also go to the Zencash Discord server and look in the Tech Node Support channel there. Have a good night. If all of this seems a little bit too daunting for you, then you can contact me and I would be happy to set it up for you. All those details you can find at patheyman.com/zen. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell sign so you get a notification when I post a new video, and I'll talk to you later.